do you view the potential of, let's say, the threat of just Russia? Leave China out of it for a second, okay? And I know that there's ties there and everything, but let's just focus on Russia because that's technically, they're the ones doing the war in Ukraine. Do you view the burgeoning threat of that, like say they take a piece of Ukraine, just a piece of it, is it on the same wavelength for you as like the rise of Hitler in the 1930s?
I see the parallels, and more than that, I am scared of the precedent that it sets. So if we as a world say, okay, it's okay to invade countries and take territory, Taiwan is next. And there are normal people there that have normal lives and are good people that are worried about their lives and their safety. And there's this domino effect that I feel will take place if we as a world and as a nation say, okay, we're going to give this little sliver of the Ukraine to the Russians and they'll stop. In the same way that we said to Hitler, hey, if you take this little sliver of this particular country, you'll stop after this. We'll impose this policy of appeasement. He'll stop after he has these tiny pieces of territory. And he didn't. And it ultimately led into the World War.
Yeah, one of the things that I don't really buy in this argument is when people try to blame the whole thing on NATO. And they try to say like, oh, well, we were being careless on his borders and putting shit there, which I'm not saying there wasn't carelessness. There definitely was. But it's like there's a huge difference between having a few ever so slightly aggressive postures and then someone invading an entire sovereign nation, right? Like those are two very different things to me. And so while there were communication fuck-ups and carelessness and things like that, I cannot for the life of me understand why Putin would do this, because it is the catalyst event that has really now cut off the East from the West, because now, as you just said yourself, people are tying in China to this and the precedents, and we see that China and Russia, they're trying not to be overly public about it, but they're right next to each other.
Sure.
Some oil going back and forth, some other shit. And now you have the West all kind of lining up saying, ooh, let's draw the Iron Curtain line around those countries, and you potentially are going to have a way bigger problem. Knock on wood, hope that doesn't happen. So when I hear your precedent argument, I understand it. And there's a lot of people right now who are going to be in the YouTube comments like, fuck this guy, military-industrial complex, whatever. I appreciate you're calling it as you see it, and you don't have an agenda with this. I get that. But you also have talked with me on the phone a little bit when we were talking like a month ago. You had mentioned that you do look at the military-industrial complex and that there's some things where, and correct me if I'm paraphrasing you wrong here, but there's some things where it's like, yeah, why the fuck do we do that? Or why are we constantly cycling to do this or that, and basically making full industries out of this, despite the fact that you're from the industry and like you enjoyed your time. Like, how do you balance that with constantly finding the latest war and saying, well, if we don't do it, it's going to be a precedent?
So I have a unique perspective with this because I have been on both sides of the military and industrial complex. I've been in the military and I've been a defense contractor as well. So I've seen what both sides of this machine tends to be. And I think it's very easy to make a 10-minute YouTube video about what this thing actually is, but actually living in it has given me an interesting perspective to how the inner workings of it actually function. So what I have seen from, we'll take the tech piece specifically, a lot of the world-changing technologies that make our way into our lives, a lot of the time, an overwhelming majority of the time, those technologies start as military technologies. I'll give an example. GPS technologies is a phenomenal example of this. During the Gulf War, during the invasion of the Gulf in the early 90s, GPS technology was a military application that allowed Allied forces or U.S. military forces to navigate and maneuver in sandstorms. So the GIs that were deployed there, the sandstorms that were apparent during their convoys, they were so thick that they could put out their hands and they couldn't see in front of them, but we could still fire and maneuver with whatever tanks or convoys we were running at the time. That was coming from a military system of satellites where assets on the ground would talk to those satellites and give you a GPS map that would show you where to drive. So the application started from a military need. Once the military need was accomplished, it then trickled its way down into the civilian sector. I have seen that pattern over and over and over again. So I think the military funds the military with the funding package that it does from a protection standpoint, but it also is from an investment standpoint as well. Another example of this would be, we'll take my jobs specifically, the network engineering or enterprise grade networking. How the internet works as a whole started as a military technology. We had interconnected ballistic missile silos that all had to talk and share and communicate information between one another. So the US government funded a bunch of really smart people to develop a system where all these remote sites could talk and share and communicate with one another. That became the framework for the internet.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.